Hi everyone, welcome back to AB-Aquariums. I wanted to go into 5 tips and hints on ways we can save money in this aquarium hobby, because let's be honest, it's not the cheapest hobby in the world, and there's certainly some ways we can do to cut costs. So let's dive into that and have a look at 5 ways we can save money in this hobby. I'll also include a few bonus bits of information, just general information about the aquarium hobby that we can do to be better aquarists in general. So yeah, we'll follow along and we'll dive right in. The first thing you can do to save money in the aquarium hobby is don't heat the tanks, which would probably be a really controversial thing to say, but just don't heat the tanks. Heat the room, or heat the rooms the tanks are in, which is something that it took me a little while to jump on board with that, but it seems a little bit backwards having a heater and heat every single tank when you could just have that room heated and the water match the temperature in the room, which seems like the most likely thing to do. Unless you've only got 1 or 2 aquariums, then fair enough, you know, you could just have a small heater in them and that would be fine. But most houses, and you know, to keep you comfortable, you're not going to sit there shivering, you know, unless you really are struggling to afford to put the heating on and you know you're sort of just wearing 2 jumpers and just pushing through. But like most of us want to be comfortable throughout the winter and even the summer. On the cooler summers, you know, you kind of just want to keep the house relatively comfortable, sort of like the low 20s or high teens in the centigrade. There's that option there, you know, heat the room, set your thermostat to low tropical temperatures, which is what I do. I tend to keep my tropical tanks around 24 degrees centigrade, you know, not, you know, 23, 24, but it's just a lot cheaper doing it that, you know, having your thermostat set a couple of degrees higher than having your heaters set to like the 78 Fahrenheit, which is like the standard temperature that most tropical fish seem to like being kept at, or recommended to be kept at. You know, you don't need to keep them bang on that temperature. There are always fluctuations in nature in temperatures, and you know, they wouldn't experience the rivers and the lakes and whatever you being at a certain bang on temperature all the time, you know, so there would be little fluctuations, and that's what you would get in ambient temperatures in a house as well. I would definitely recommend having your thermostat set a little bit higher, just so you know you have to be in a t-shirt rather than a jumper. Kind of not, you don't feel like you're hot all the time indoors, but it's just kind of like it's comfortable in a t-shirt. Like in this room right now, it's around 23.5 degrees, and I feel absolutely fine in a t-shirt. I don't feel too hot. I feel absolutely fine. The dog's got a big hairy coat, and he feels absolutely, well, I assume he hasn't told me, but I assume he's doing all right. I mean, he's not panting and huffing and puffing. He's doing absolutely fine in these temperatures as well. So, yeah, and bear in mind that your other things in the tank are going to affect the temperatures as well. You know, having a light and canister filters and pumps running and wave makers is all adding extra heat to the tank, and you've probably already heard that before, but it does make a bit of a difference. If you've got a light blaring down on the water, that's adding residual heat as well. So bear that in mind as well. You're going to get that excess temperature there as well, which can be a hindrance in the summer when your room's getting too hot, and thermostats obviously doesn't make a difference then, does it? Because your heating's not even coming on. You know, it's getting that warm in the room, you kind of have to cool them down then. But obviously you can blow a fan over the top of the water surface to take away a little bit of the heat off the water. But that's a different subject anyway. That's if you wanted to cool your tanks down, but we're not too concerned about that in this video. That's just another way of doing it. That's the first thing I'd recommend if you want to save money in this hobby, which is something that I've definitely found I needed to do, rather than having, the biggest thing for me was having tanks in my shed. The shed was absolutely freezing. Obviously during the winter, is that, you know, there's very little insulation, but you're having heaters in the tanks. You'd find that they're working overtime. They're on all the time and they're barely keeping up. So I definitely wouldn't keep tanks in an uninsulated building. Well, there is a little bit of insulation in my shed, but you know, it's still really cold. It's still not doing the job in terms of like a proper insulated building. So would definitely recommend keeping your tanks somewhere where the building's at least insulated and can hold heat. So there's that one. Heating the room instead of individual tanks if you've got more than 1 or 2 tanks, which is, you know, if you've only got 1 or 2 aquariums, you're probably not that worried about the power usage, unless you've got like 4 FX6 filters on it and it's just draining, you know, it's just using electric for fun, you know. The other recommendation I make to save a little bit of money in the hobby is, why have your lights on so long? You know, unless you're growing plants in the tank, which to be fair, a lot of them can survive quite well with some ambient light. You know, if you've got your tank near a window, not too near obviously that you're getting loads of algae, which you can keep on top of with scrapers and what have you, and certain shrimp they'll keep on top of, you know, a Marno shrimp or Otocinclus or various other fish will keep on top of certain algae if you can have it a little bit near a window. But you don't need to have the aquarium light on 12-14 hours a day. You can definitely only have it on when you're home. Let's just say if you're out at work all day long and you wanted to have it on a few hours in the evening, it's more for your benefit, you know, rather than the fish. The fish are quite happy with the ambient light coming into the room. You know, they don't need a big aquarium light blaring down on them all day long while you're not there. But I've been guilty of this as well. You don't have to leave your light on all day long. If you do need to save money in the hobby, maybe have the light schedules and the light timers, you know, down to a certain amount of time. And that brings us on to the other way to save money, is have the lights on timers, rather than forgetting to leave your lights on or turn them on as soon as you get up just instinctively, and then as soon as you go to bed turn them off, which them lights could have been on 16 hours or something crazy like that, maybe 18 hours depending on how late you stay up. So get a timer for your lights so that everything's on a timer, you know when they're coming on and off. So if you want it 10 hours a day, you know when you've got the lights coming on when they're going off. So there's that option there. But yeah, no, I definitely think that that's something that we're doing a bit too much. We're probably over lighting the tanks a little bit too much, unless even if you've got plants, you know, they don't need to be lit up for 12 to 14 hours a day full blast. You know, they can probably take a little bit less light, maybe 8 hours, unless you have no plants at all, and then maybe just have the light on when you get home, just for your own benefit in the winter when it's getting dark early, so you can see the fish and see the tank. Maybe have it on for a few hours in the evening. So yeah, another saving there. Don't have the lights on so much. You don't really need to have them on that long. So another way you can save money in the hobby, and I don't know what number we're on now, maybe 3 or 4. If you wanted to keep more fish or you wanted to set up another tank, you don't have to go out and buy a brand new tank. To save money and you want to continue doing the hobby, get a second-hand tank. Buy a tank that someone's getting rid of because they want out of the hobby for whatever reason. You know, they might be finding it too expensive, or they've fallen out of love with the hobby for now, which sometimes happens to all of us, you know. So another way you can save money is buy used tanks, you know, and stands. That's something I've always done, you know. I mean, I might have the odd new tank, but to be fair, most of them are second-hand. Like this one behind me, that's a used tank. The stands are used. Everything about that tank is pretty much second-hand, apart from a few, you know, sort of lights and bits like that. But you can save a lot of money in this hobby by buying used, you know, especially with filtration. Like the other day I picked up a Fluval FX4 for £60, you know, whereas a brand new one is what, around 250 quid, you know. So it's a big saving there, and obviously you want to make sure it's working. So I asked the seller to set it all up for me so I can see it all working, make sure everything's with it, and everything works just fine. It only been running for a year. So, you know, just goes to show you can save some money by buying equipment and tanks as well, by, you know, maybe places like Facebook Marketplace or eBay. You know, I don't know what you've got over in the United States, but I know Facebook Marketplace seems to be quite popular all over the world at the moment for buying second-hand things. And yeah, would definitely recommend that one. That's where I got most of my bits from, is Marketplace. So would definitely recommend that if you're trying to save money and you want to stay in the hobby and maybe get a few more tanks, or, you know, maybe you're setting up like a bit of a room for fish and you want to have like a row of tanks. You can buy a load of used tanks. And another place where they've got like shops closing down, like fish shops closing down, they might have like a load of used tanks on offer or something like that. But yeah, another good way of saving money in the hobby is buying used equipment. So how else can you save money in this hobby? And again, it comes down, it's sort of similar to the used equipment one, but in this situation, this might be setting up your tank. So you've got your tank, you've got your stand, you've got everything you need to have a tank set up, but then you're thinking, well, I need to buy all the substrate, the rocks, the wood, you know, the fish and everything like that. And it's just like, well, this is just a never-ending expense. But one of the easiest things I've found is that why not maybe find some things in nature? You know, a lot of these things that you might borrow from nature, you know, you might have a river nearby and there might be a lot of cobbles down there that you might be able to get a couple now and then on your walks and bring a few home, and a few nice rocks you like the look of. You're only borrowing those pieces, you know, they're just temporarily going to be in your tank. Say if you had to get it set up for a few years, just take them back. You know, when you finish with that aquarium, you know, in time you probably can return a lot of these rocks back to the river. But let's be honest, a lot of these things are being recycled anyway. You know, they end up somewhere and they end up getting back into nature somewhere or another, don't they? If you need to set up a tank cheaply, you can save money with certain sand and rocks that are cheaper than sort of aquarium specific stuff. So you got things like the play sand, which is quite a dirty sand, but if you're willing to try and wash it or let the filtration take the dust out of the water once you've set a tank up, which depending on how careful you set the tank up, obviously if you're pouring the sand into an already set up tank, you've got no hope. It's going to be really dirty and cloudy for a long time. Whereas if you're sort of having it a bit like a dirt layer, the sand and dirt all together on the bottom, it's kind of just like the dirt in the play sand is really just really fine sand particles ground down, and it's really hard to wash all that out. You're going to keep trying with buckets, but you never get it all washed out. But what I'm saying is, you don't need to buy aquarium specific sand. You can use things like play sand, which is just a silica quartz sand, which is safe for fish. It's inert, so it's not emitting anything into the water. So you can definitely use that. There's no reason why you can't. And it's a nice soft sand for ground dwelling fish like corydoras, catfish, geophagus. Anything that likes to get the fish in their gills and spit it out and find food through the sand. Did I say fish? They get sand in there. They like to absorb sand through their gills. So yeah, it's just basically getting the food through the sand. They just come straight back out the gills again. But obviously that's a lot easier with the soft sand than rather than like a sharp grit. So yeah, another saving there. You can use aquarium sand, and I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, you can't use that. It's not fish specific and it's not aquarium specific." And it's like, well, that's just because it's not been washed as well, really, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest. A lot of the aquarium sands are silica based as well. Unless you've got like an aragonite or some sort of coral sand, which is basically like really old coral skeletons ground down into like a really fine sand. Unless you've got something like that, a lot of these coarse sands that you can find in aquarium shops that are really nice, pretty sands, a lot of them are man-made as well. When I say man-made, I mean like a quartz stone ground down to like the right size grain. You might get the old ones that are like naturally sourced, but a lot of them are sort of rocks and quartz ground down. But yeah, play sand works. I know pool filter sand works as well, which for some reason it's quite expensive over here in the UK for pool filter sand now, unless you can get it in bulk somewhere. But over in the US it seems to be quite cheap, pool filter sand, and it's a little bit more coarse than the play sand. I know the play sand over here in the UK is really fine, which isn't the end of the world, but it can get kicked up and it can be a little bit fine sometimes, especially if you've got like a lot of filtration, a lot of flow, and it can, your canister filter might absorb a little bit of sand from the suction pipe now and then, if you've got like geophagus spitting it out near the intake. But yeah, that's something to bear in mind. If you want a slightly more coarse sand, you could try pool filter sand. So yeah, we've spoken about sand and where you can get rocks from. Maybe get rocks from your local river, or somewhere nearby in nature that you can borrow some rocks from temporarily. Not saying you're going to go and nick all the rocks and bring it all back in wheelbarrows, but you might go down with a rucksack and grab a couple of stones that you like the look of now and then. Build a little bit of a collection for a tank. And then you can use them. There's no reason why you can't use them. Maybe give them a bit of a wash. Let's be honest, fish in nature are exposed to a lot more filth and muck than you would imagine. So yeah, I'd imagine a little bit of that muck from nature will probably do your tank a favour. To be honest, it will get it going, get it started, get the cycle started, and get the tank matured quicker, because you've already got a load of that bacteria already on the rocks. And if you can find some driftwood as well, you might be on a winner as well. Because driftwood, manzanita wood and Malaysian driftwood that you buy specifically from aquarium shops is extremely expensive for basically what is a piece of rotten old wood, that will continue rotting in your tank. But you can definitely find native trees and branches that have fallen in the rivers, and they've gone like a really old, aged, smooth look, that they'll be washed up on a riverbank somewhere that you could definitely use. Just maybe try and wash it down with some boiling water. It's the main thing is it's going to keep adding tannins to your aquarium water, which you can take out mostly with carbon, but or water changes. It's just. But there's something else to bear in mind. You don't need to get aquarium specific things to stock the tank with the hardscape, if you know what I mean. And then that brings us on to fish. So another big expense in this hobby can be the fish that you want to stock the tank with. But you don't need to buy the most expensive fish to stock a tank. You know, there's some. I mean, let's be honest. Any fish you can keep in your home is amazing. You know, it's just amazing that we can keep, you know, these fish that are found in nature, and some are even more or less extinct in nature, and then keep them in our aquariums, you know, and watch them, you know, thrive and have a good life in our homes. So that's just brilliant. You know, it's kind of like you're preserving that fish, aren't you? You know, you're keeping them going because you can't find them in the wild anymore. You know, even though they can be reintroduced, but for some reason they're not able to thrive in nature anymore, and we can make them thrive in our homes, which is, you know, amazing. And what I'm coming on to is the fact that they're so cheap. You know, even though they're a stunning looking fish, especially you've got like the gold white cloud with like the red tail, the gold body, you know, even the standard white cloud with a lot of red all over them, you know, they're just amazing shoaling fish. You know, you get a nice group of 10 or 20 of them in a nice aquarium, you know, maybe like a 20 or 30 gallon tank. You know, it's a nice shoal to watch. And you know, they're not that expensive. You can get 10 for, I don't know, £15, you know, or you know, half a dozen for 12 quid, something like that, from my local shop anyway. That's around what they're priced at, which is, you know, very reasonable, I think, for what you're getting out of the hobby for, you know, for it, you know. So yeah, another little saving there. You don't have to get the most expensive rare fish in the world. You know, you can get something fairly common. And another thing about the white cloud is you don't need a heater, so you don't need to keep your house warm. You know, so if you wanted to keep cooler tanks and you didn't need to keep your heating just as high, you know, you could keep it more on the lower end. A white cloud and fish like that, and some of the barbs as well, they can easily stay at a lower room temperature, no problem at all. You know, a lot of people say cold water fish. Well, you're not keeping them cold, are you? You're not keeping them outside in the freezing cold. You keep them inside in like 68 Fahrenheit, which is what, like 18, 19 degrees centigrade. You know, which is what most homes sit at, even with the heating not really on that high. You know, sort of just like a steady level. You know, so you're not keeping them cold. It's a temperate temperature that's reasonable. You know, it's not too low for them. It's about right. They'll thrive at that. So yeah, another money saver is what fish you can get. So there you have it. A little bit of a long-winded video, but we got there in the end. So I hope it was of some use. And if you could let me know your thoughts in the comments of ideas that you've got of ways you can save money and your way of keeping fish, or if I'm doing it wrong, or just your general thoughts. But yeah, leave it down in the comments and follow along for more content, and drop us a subscribe if you fancy, if you like what you see, and I'll bring you some more information. I'll see you on the next one.